Welcome back to DAGryffyn Hobby. My name's Dave. I've completed a project that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and that is servicing this 2343 Santa Fe F3. I've had these engines for quite some time. It's taken me a very long time to get to servicing the powered unit. I cleaned up the two dummies quite a while ago, maybe about a year ago, and I did a video on that. But this part 2 has been a long time coming. I've got here before me a set of 2343s. I cleaned the dummies all up inside, made sure everything was moving smooth and clean. And they're in mechanically very great shape. There are imperfections on the shells, but you know, it was a toy. At this point, they're a little dusty, but there's a couple of paint touch-ups on both cabs, multiple spots, you know, some wear marks and whatnot. These were used, they were played with, but they're in pretty good shape. The fronts look pretty good. The grab irons are there, the sticker is mostly there, number boards, windshield, the screens. The B unit has what I assume are two original portal windows, one replacement and one missing. There's some scuffs on the paint, some little dings in the plastic, but otherwise in pretty good shape. The trucks have all been cleaned and lubricated. And what that leaves us with is the powered A unit. And I have run this a few times. It runs really well, but I'm sure it needs a pretty good service. So that's what I'm going to do now. And this is a project I've been meaning to do for a long time. This one has two screws at the back and one screw at the front. The later models have one screw at the front and two clips at the back that clip the body to the frame. This shell's a little dirty. Looks like it's got the original portal windows, GM sticker, the ladders, the grab rails, sticker, headlight, windshield, horns, screens. So this actually looks pretty clean. Nice tension on the lever for the E unit. No battery exploded inside, so that's nice. Let's take the horn out of the way. A little screw on each side, which is a little hard to do when you can't see what you're doing. And then the horn should just come up out of the way. For the E unit, since it looks pretty good, I'm going to take some contact cleaner. I know it says WD-40. It's not the oil. It is specifically a contact cleaner. I'm just going to spray in by the fingers and the drum. This is a E unit, probably from similar engine because of the long bar here. What gets dirty in there? The drum here. The drum spins and makes contact with metal fingers, and over time it gets dirty, and maybe the drum doesn't spin too well. Like this one barely moves. It requires too much force. So if this doesn't spin, then your locomotive won't change direction. It's going to stay in whatever gear it's in, forward, reverse, or neutral. So this one needs to be serviced, which is why it's not in something. But the drums will get dirty, and I've even seen them completely disintegrate because they were so old and used. But this drum is in good shape. It's just dirty and not spinning well. There are two fingers here, 1, 2, and then there are 4 fingers back here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and all those need to be clean, in good shape, and make good contact. So by spraying the contact cleaner in there, I'm hoping to clean any residue off those fingers and off of the drum. To take the motor out, there are 2 long screws, usually with a washer of some sort, although I don't see one in here. Oh, no, this one's got a washer on it. I think there were 2 washers in here, and one of them got kind of crushed. But after those 2 screws are out, the motor lifts off and the truck comes out. This concerns me. It looks like deposits from the brushes from the motor, so we'll definitely have to get a look at that. Once the motor is out, you can take these two screws out at the back of the truck. With those two screws out, top lifts off, and then we can see the shaft that runs through the center of the truck. This is the bushing that the axle rides in, and if you look at it, there's this notch right here. You see there's a kind of a cut in one side. It's very important that that goes back facing up, just as I removed it. That's the way it was. Otherwise, this shaft is not in the exact right location, and it can cause binding and poor running. Also, there is a ball bearing in there, so make sure that's in yours. I don't recall how easily this drive shaft comes out, if at all, on this one, because this part is riveted in place, so you can't lift the whole thing out. There's another bearing block in there, and that's not going to come out because it's held in by the coupler. The reason these bushing blocks are so important is it keeps the shaft in the proper location. If it's not there, if it's worn or the bearing's gone, you see that center shaft moves and it's going to bind in the truck and nothing is going to work right. And to take the side frames off, you remove the screw, then the ladder and the frame come off. Keep that together and keep in mind which side it's on, because if you put it on the wrong side, that ladder is going to be in the wrong place. So I'm going to flip this back around to the orientation of my engine here. So that's the left. This truck does not have a pickup on it. We can remove the two screws holding the plate in on the bottom. The plate lifts off, and if this were the power truck, you'd have a wire coming through here. There's that washer that was in the wrong spot and is slightly broken. You would have wires come through here and the pickup would mount, but there's really nothing in there. I know there's a way to get this out, but at the moment, I don't remember what it is. And I don't want to take off the coupler, so I don't have the tool to rivet that back in place. So I'm going to spray a little contact cleaner in here, just to break up any gumminess. So I'm just spraying the bottom a little bit and in between the wheels and the truck body. Again, just to help kind of break up any residue that might be sitting in it. The contact cleaner will also help to break up some of this dirt that's been caked on the wheels. I'm just going to work on cleaning this up a little bit more, drying it off, and then we'll get back to lubricating it and putting it back together. All right, I spent some time cleaning up the truck. I use this metal pick here to help scrape residue and little hairs and junk out of the gear. I also used a toothpick to kind of come in here and scrape anything out of this well where the big gear sits. And I have to say there was not a lot of lubrication in here. So I don't know what it looked like when they did it, but it's a good thing I opened it up. Got Labelle 102 here. Labelle is great stuff. They sell kits, 102, 107, and a grease. Labelle 106, we're going to be using both of these. I'm going to put a little bit on the end of the axle shaft where it goes into the bushing. Like that spot there. I'm going to put this one back in. I'm going to put 102 on the ends of the axles. I'm going to take the 106 and put a generous helping here on the gears. I can put this plate back on. The screws that go here have the larger kind of flat heads. Make them tight, but don't over tighten. That's why I use a pocket screwdrivers, because you can only put so much torque on it. Use a big handle on a screwdriver, you could turn it enough and probably snap the thing. There was nothing to service down here, so we'll put the cover back on. If you take this off and you're cleaning it, don't bend it, because it can be fragile, so try not to bend that. So that's cleaning the truck, and it applies to both trucks with minimal differences. If there are differences between the process of cleaning this one and the front one, I'll show you those differences. And we're not going to put it back together yet, but I wanted to point out there should be this little spring that sits in this recess on the frame and kind of rests on this part of the motor. And that just adds a little bit of pressure to keep things from banging around too much. Put that guy to the side, and let's take a look at the motor. Maybe it comes off, maybe it doesn't. Depends how much slack there is in the wires. Oh, when there's enough, that's lovely. This definitely needs cleaning. See how those brushes are just kind of sitting in there and they've got all this carbon buildup? That is definite need of servicing. A sticky, dirty, contaminated brush will definitely affect your running. And that's just filthy too, and the grooves in between the sections are just packed. So this is it, even though it looked really clean, is in desperate need. Just going to scrape that carbon out of there carefully. If you haven't done it before, I'd recommend using something softer, like a toothpick. Oh, wow. This thing is filthy. Looking better already. Now, the wire I'm really hesitant about is this solid wire from the coil. Really, really don't want to break that. I mean, it's fixable. It's just, I'd rather not have to. And this brush plate is filthy. And that's definitely going to affect how well the engine runs. Now, you can use a Q-tip at this point, but you got to be careful not to leave little fragments of Q-tip and everything, little strands. You want to make sure that it's all cleared out of there. I don't know if I have any brushes on hand, so I'm going to look. If I have new ones, I'll put new ones in. Otherwise, these really aren't bad. I don't know if they're brand new, but I do have new brushes. This brush is new. You can see the difference. The ones in here are definitely worn down. The thing with the brushes is you want to make sure that they move freely in place. If they go up and don't spring back, then you're going to have really poor contact. So whenever you put them in there, just make sure they spring back. And then just carefully put the brush plate back on. Okay, I'm not going to tighten them right now. I'm just going to put them in place. Now, if this were really filthy and rusty, I would take the brush plate off, desolder all the wires, try to remove the field off the motor frame, and get in there and clean as much as possible. I don't believe you can get the armature shaft out without pulling the gear off. I left the brush plate loose so that I could get in here at the shaft on the other side of the armature and make sure that it's not caked up. And also put a little bit of Labelle on it. Not that you need to do that, because there's a spot right here on top for oiling. And then I'm just going to use a toothpick and try to clean the junk out of the end here. A little contact cleaner in there to help break up what I refer to as the schmutz. So now I'm going to tighten the nuts on the brush plate. And again, don't over tighten because you will crack the brush plate. And that's a pain in the butt. The truck in place, make sure the spring's there, position the motor. And then before you screw in the other one, push the motor back down so it's seated in its proper location. And then you can tighten both of the screws down. I didn't notice before I started taking it apart that the gear for the rear axle is either gone, worn, something. I don't know. It's not there. It doesn't work. You spin the other axle and the gear goes. So those are driven. These aren't. So what we have here now is instead of a 4-axle drive, we got 3-axle drive. If I had another truck that wasn't in horrible condition, I'd put it in this one, but I guess this is what this one has. It's unfortunate, but when it's back together, I'll check to see how it runs and how it pulls, and I imagine it will be fine. So we'll put the motor back on again, center the truck, make sure the spring is there. We'll put a couple of drops of 102, kind of move the motor around a little bit here and there until it feels like it finds its place, and then screw it down. You want to make sure it's lined up well so that the gears aren't binding. So the back half has been serviced. I'm not going to worry about the relay for the horn at the moment, but I'm going to go ahead and clean the front truck and motor. The truck comes out, but now because this one has the pickups on it, you have the feeder wire here. I'll desolder this so we can take the truck off and go from there. This is a new soldering iron, cordless Fantic. Once I've used it a little bit and I can give an opinion on it, maybe I'll do a video. We move the motor off to the side and we can pull the truck out. The front truck's a little different than the rear. There's this spring here. You just gently pry it up. That is for the front coupler. You flip it over and take this screw out here. That holds that part on. Sometimes these will then slide up off of the post and come out. Usually not. So we'll take out the rear screws and see if that helps us out. So then you can remove the plate, move the coupler forward so you can get to the 2 screws that hold the front apron on. With those 2 screws removed, you can remove the apron and the front coupler. Again, you want to keep track of which side these frames go on. Not that the frames themselves aren't interchangeable, but you want to remember the position of the black ladders. Now this one's different than the rear truck because now we have access to both of these bushings. And you can just lift the whole drive shaft out. And then flip it over. Take the 2 screws out for the pickup rollers. Wire for the couplers attached. So you can desolder that and take it off, or you can just clean it up as it is to save yourself a solder. The black wire goes through the circle hole right above the shoe, and the red wire goes through the oblong hole back by the wheel. And then we're back down to just cleaning this up with whatever means you like. Just make sure all the residue is gone, all the dirt. Try to clean up the inside as best you can and go from there. Everything has been cleaned up and is, or should be, in good working order at this point. All I'm trying to do with this project is clean this up and make sure everything runs and works properly. I'm not trying to restore it or anything like that. So there are numerous things I would do if this was a restoration. First, of course, I would have fixed the rear truck so that all four wheels moved properly. Second, I'd replace the pickup rollers. You can see the groove worn in the middle of each one. I've spent some time and cleaned up all the individual parts, scraped all the hardened grease out of the gear, and now I'm ready to put it back together. I'm going to put some oil down on the axle on the inside. Then I'll put some Labelle 106 down on the gears. These bushings or bearings or whatever that go on the end of the drive shaft, I put a drop of 102 in there, and then they just go on the end. Make sure you put the groove in the block facing downward so that the notch is facing up. It might not seem like it makes much of a difference, but it does in the way that the gears mesh. It just works better this way. I'm wondering if I wanted to do it this way or another way, but whatever, we'll keep going. Now, a very important thing to remember is this, but this insulator is very important. It's also fragile, so when you clean it, just rub it gently on a paper towel or something. Don't flex it at all. And that just sits there and insulates the pickup roller from the truck. I'll put the red wire through the oblong hole and the black wire through the circle hole, and then pull the wires through. You make sure the wires aren't pinched, you line up the plate and screw it down. Now that that's in, now we put the drive shaft in. Okay, the notch is up, the groove is down. The black wire runs along this channel and out the front, and the red wire sits here and comes out through this opening. Once the wires are placed and the plate's back on, we can move on to the next step. And I'm just wondering specifically which way will be easier to get this back together, especially since I took it apart with these screws out. Also, the trick is remembering which way this goes in. Ah, okay. So it still takes finagling, but take the front coupler, take the plow, put it through the top, and kind of wiggle, turn, and swing it through the front of the apron. Now you can put both pieces down, but you can't get the screws in like this, so you do have to take these screws out. So this is what you'll find when you work on things that you don't work on often, is sometimes you have to backtrack a little just because you're not familiar with the steps, and that's fine. Happens to me all the time. I can pick the plate up and move it enough that I can get the screws in here. It's entirely possible I'll have to take it apart again so that I can solder the front coupler, but I hope not. So then we put that on, then we put the plate down. Then I'm going to flip it over and attempt, yeah, I'm not sure that was the right way to do it. And I don't think I have enough clearance to get around it. So now many times these are the things I'll edit out of the video because it doesn't make for a cohesive video. But this is the reality of working on these things when you're not used to doing it all the time. You work on something that you haven't worked on in a year, you're not necessarily going to remember the steps, or at least not the steps in the right order. And that's fine. It's just, you know, like I said, it doesn't make for a great video usually, but I also don't want to ignore the fact that not everything goes smoothly. Sometimes people will comment and say, oh, you make it look so easy. And I always say, well, yeah, because video editing, you can edit out the flubs and the missteps. But when it comes down to it, yeah, there's lots of back and forth, a lot of mistakes, a lot of doing things 2, 3, 4, 5 times until you get it right. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just part of the process. So what I was trying to do was clear the hole of the solder so I could get the wire through. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that and do it at an angle that you can see, but I'm going to try. So heat it up. See, that's taking me too long. I need to heat it up and shove the wire through kind of at the same time. It's one of those times 3 extra hands would come in handy. Okay, I got it started before the solder started to cool. So then I'll just heat it up again and push it through. One more time. Then you just want to make sure that the wire from the coil is still attached. And it is, because it goes through the hole and it's wrapped around a few times. Wire is attached. Now we can go back yet again, make sure that the bearings are still in the right place. Pick up the coupler, put it over the pole there, place the wire, make sure everything sits nicely, and put the screws back in. Again, what I find to be the most important is staying patient with yourself. I also find that to be very hard a lot of the time, especially when I do things like that, where I knock the screw down and then I can't get my fingers on it, I can't get it back in the right spot. You got to just be patient. And if you got to walk away from it for a few minutes, walk away from it. It's a hobby. Don't let yourself get all upset. This part here is very fragile when it comes to these 2 spots, and you can bend it easily, so be gentle with that. Then make sure that the coupler goes back and forth without hitting. We have this clip we can try to put on. I don't know if it's going to pop off again, but it sits there like that, and that's what returns the coupler to center. Yep, be careful with that spring. It will easily pop out. You might want to wait until you're ready to put the truck back on the engine before you put that in place. So that's the truck all cleaned up, hopefully working better. It certainly looks a little better. So what's left at this point is to clean the front motor. This definitely needs a cleaning. The brushes look dirty on the end, and there's definitely residue in there, carbon, dirt, oil, grease, whatever. So it definitely needs a cleaning. So I'll do that. It's just the same as the process on the other motor. So I'll clean this up, then we'll get back to putting the engine back together. All right, everything's cleaned up. We're ready to go back together. The only other step after putting it back together will be soldering the pickup wire back there. The truck under there. Now there's no spring on this one like there is on the back truck. Make sure the front gears are meshed properly and not fighting each other or sitting tooth on tooth. Keep pressure on it and start the screws. Oh, I didn't do something. I didn't stick the wire where it's supposed to go. It's supposed to go up through this cut in the back here, and I'll solder that back on. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time on DAGryffyn Hobby.